welcome. My name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. In this episode, we are diving into Makoto Shinkai's newest film, Weathering with You, a story inspired by the rising threat of climate change that has really impacted us in the midst of a different global disaster. From the breathtaking detail in animation to the exquisite emotional connection of its characters, Weathering with You drops viewers into the perfect storm of climactic storytelling and impeccable visuals. Emma Martin is joining me to dive deep into the themes and development of quite possibly my favorite film of 2020. So thank you to the Fanimated crew over at patreon.com/Fanimated for voting on this topic. Spoiler warning for Weathering with You, and let's get started and let's get animated. Emma, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so wonderfully. How are you?
I'm doing extra fantastic because you're here in front of me in person for the first time
Stop.
in forever.
For the first time in forever.
Back in the day, I only did podcast recordings in person with people, and since I moved, since the pandemic, everything's been virtual, online, and it just feels really nice to kind of get back to the roots of like, here we are in person talking.
Yes, it's like we're both in the studio again.
Exactly.
I
It's
love that.
so great. So we're recording this in the past, listeners. You're listening to this in our future, so hello.
Hi. How is it now?
Yeah, how's it going? Hopefully, I'm hoping that it's wonderful. In the future, we'll see. No.
Yes. You can make it a great day either way.
Yes. We hope you're all doing fantastic. And today we're going to be talking about Weathering with You.
Yay! So excited.
I'm so excited. And I say we're in the past because this is gonna. I have no idea when this is coming out. So you guys are all fantastic and hopefully have seen Weathering with You now that hopefully it's been out on DVD for a longer period of time. It only just got out on DVD as of recording this, in the US at least. But Weathering with You is one of our favorite films.
One of our favorites, absolutely.
Absolutely. If you want to hear us geek out even more about Makoto Shinkai and his work, Your Name, you can listen to our Your Name episode for even more Shinkai content. But we love Weathering with You. I mean, for me at least, just as much. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I still love Your Name the most.
Yeah.
And that's probably because the plot is just way more intricate and beautiful. But, because of how beautifully animated it is and the storyline, too, it's up there, with favorite films. So Your Name beats it just by a little bit, but it's right under there.
Yeah. I agree that Your Name and Weathering with You are different viewing experiences for me. Your Name, I'm definitely fully immersed in the world, in the characters, in the story. And with Weathering with You, it's more of being immersed in the beautiful visuals that are happening.
Yes.
It's an absolutely stunningly animated film. Not that Your Name isn't, but I put Weathering with You at even a higher level of mastery.
Right. Your Name is gorgeous, throughout, and there's definitely a lot of awe-inspiring moments. Mm-hmm. But Weathering with You, it's every single shot or take, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa! It's just my eyes.
We were rewatching it, and we would just geek out, every shot. We were just like, oh my goodness, this, oh my goodness, how did they do that? Just absolutely in awe of what they were able to achieve visually.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
An absolute masterpiece. So if you haven't seen it, this is your spoiler warning. Definitely go watch it.
Yes, please do. If you loved Your Name, you will love Weathering with You. And if you haven't seen either, just get on that boat because it is a beautiful journey and it's great for beginner anime watchers. Mm-hmm. And it's just, they're both stories that leave you feeling so full at the end.
Yes. Exactly. And before we get into characters and plot and animation and everything that's so wonderful about this film, I wanted to ask you, Emma and I both watched it in theaters this year. It came out in the U.S. January 2020. And
it feels like years ago.
feels like years and years ago. And it came out in Japan July of 2019. So when you saw it in theaters back January, what stuck out to you the most?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was a great experience just being able to see an anime film in theaters. Mm-hmm. I think this was my second experience doing that besides Your Name. So when I went and saw it, this is kind of a big deal for me, but it was the second film I had gone to see on my own. I never go to the movie theater alone. I'm a very social person, so it's just not what I do. But this was the second film I had seen on my own because I have a lot of friends who like anime, but not enough close friends that I'm like, hey, let's go see this film together.
Yeah.
So, because Kelly was not, present in the area. So, anyway, I went to the theater and it was awesome because the theater was packed and full of nerds. So I was just really excited that wow, I'm not alone. I'm in this sea of nerds. It's great. And it was the first time I saw it subbed. Whereas the second time I saw it dubbed with Kelly. And seeing it was just really fun as an audience member to watch this production and see it all come to life. And especially in moments where the audience witnessed plot points or characters that shocked them, the whole audience would gasp together or I thought I was going to be that only person in the audience who was oh my goodness, but the whole audience was like that, and that was so fun to be a part of.
That is so amazing. I yearn for that kind of experience. That's part of why I love going to the movie theater so much. Is you get to experience something with a group of people, and none of you guys will never all be in the same place experiencing the same thing ever again. There's something magical about that. And you get to be a part of viewing this and experiencing it with other people and hearing reactions and getting to react with others, even if you were alone, you're not alone. And that's just me being really sentimental right now because I haven't been to the movie theater since March. Oh man. But I also saw it in theaters. Unlike Emma, I am super comfortable and go to the movie theater by myself all the time.
That's okay.
Just because there's always so much I want to see, and I just enjoy it regardless of whether I'm there with people or not. But I actually got to see it with my sister. And around here, now that I'm living kind of rural, I have to drive to the nearest big city to see these anime films because, of course, none of the local theaters are showing it. But my sister, she's not a huge anime fan, but she loved Your Name. And so I was like, Paige, you have to come with me to see Weathering with You. I'm sure you'll love it. So I convinced her to go with me, and we, took the long drive to see it, and it was so worth it, and we made a little day out of it, and it was just for us too, the movie theater was actually, unlike your experience, it was pretty empty. There was not a lot of people that went to see it, and so when certain things happened, I wanted to
scream
scream and sigh and I had to restrain myself a little bit because no one else was making noises. So. Oh man. But it was so funny. It was so beautiful. I've only seen it English dubbed. My sister doesn't love subtitles, which is totally fair. Again, I have no qualms. I'm not part of that debate that, subtitles or dubs are better. I think both are great.
Both are great.
Both are amazing. And both are done, there are so many fantastic voice actors in every language. So absolutely fantastic. But I was so excited that's finally on DVD. And now I can just watch it and rewatch it, and I almost want to watch it again right now.
Oh, same. Seriously, I'm I need to watch it again.
Yes, it's so good. So let's get into what this story is all about. The movie follows Hodoka, and he is a teenage boy who runs away from home and runs away to Tokyo. And he's underage and he doesn't have a student ID or anything. So he can't like get a job. And so he's really struggling and he can't like quite, keep up with everything. He's kind of taken under the wing of Suga, who writes for magazines and papers and writes articles about like supernatural things or just kind of like random tabloid stuff. And
yeah, not Time magazine quality.
No, not at all. He's just running this in his basement with his niece, you know, and he, connects with Hodoka because Hodoka reminds him of himself, and so it kind of takes under the wing of Suga. And in the midst of all of this, he actually runs into Hina, who has the power to change the weather. So when she prays, she can make the rain stop and the sun come out because it's a very, very rainy summer in Tokyo when this is happening. So they decide, because both of them are a little hard on cash, Hina is living with her brother and trying to like support them. So they're like, you know what, let's turn this power that you have into a business. So they put it online that she is a real life sunshine girl, and she will like clear up the weather, and so people will pay them for her to come out and bring the sun. And it's like people who are throwing festivals, people who just want a sunny day for their sports day,
for their wedding,
for all these sorts of things. And you get to see all these different jobs they have, and Hina really loves it. Like, she really connects to that, and like is so happy to like bring happiness to others in that way. But of course, it's a Shinkai film, so there's always something upsetting. There's
always a sacrifice that has to be made.
A sacrifice, exactly. And so we learn that weather maidens are sacrificed and disappear in order for there to be good weather. So she is the weather girl, and she is going to disappear. And so, and of course, Hodoka has to run and find her and save her, and make a choice that is like, do I save Hina? Doing so would mean that it would continue to rain. The rain won't go away. Or do I save her? Do I not save her and let the sunshine come back? And that's like a real big part of the ending too, of like, did he make the right decision? Did he make the right call? So it's this really great adventure. There's of course other things going on with the fact that Hodoka has run away, so the police are after him for that. The police are after Hina and her brother because they are actually secretly underage, like she's underage too, and so
a lot to do with child services after them because they don't have adults and they need to be under that.
Yes, exactly. So they're, running, trying to get away from the police and all this other crazy stuff. So it's a really fantastic, beautiful adventure. And what makes it so visually stunning really is that it is raining most of the film.
Yeah, really all of the film, like 99.5% of the film
is rain, and it is beautiful, and we'll definitely talk about the animation. So let's talk about the characters. Let's go through the characters. Let me just stay right off the bat. Hodoka is my boy.
But of course he is.
He's my typical love him. He's just young and naive and so full of like energy and vitality, and he's just like just so sweet, he just has such a pure heart. And I love that this film the story is told through his eyes, through his lens, because I feel like any of the other characters, like Suga or Hina, like they're all a little more cynical and a little more serious. And Hodoka is the one with the hope and the optimism. And let me just say that his English voice actor is perfect. His voice is so good for this role because he's just like, he's running full force, like into this. He's striving for what he wants, and he is so innocent in like his crush on Hina, and you know, like and he gets so nervous, and you know, and he is just so adorable.
This is pure-hearted 15-year-old boy.
Yes, and I love him, and he is my everything.
He is the hiccup or the variant of this world.
Yes.
Hence why Kelly is so excited.
Exactly. Yes. If you've heard this podcast at all, you know that those are my favorite type of characters. Oh dear.
Then after Hodoka, we have Hina. And Hina is like the main girl and obviously his love interest. Mm-hmm. She is just so precious and also very pure-hearted, but she is just so determined and very passionate about what she wants. Like, she does a lot for her and her brother Nagi. Like, I mean, she has this whole apartment and she cooks a lot and she does so many things just to take care of them. And she says that she's turning 18 soon, but she's really only 15 as well. So she's just I really love her because she is so determined and she knows what she wants. And it's really precious when they do start the sunshine business because, like, she's just like, I'm in love. And Hodoka's like, what? And she's just like, with this job. It's so great. And, like, I love making people smile. Like, she's so precious and, like, just wants the best for people. And, like, I think at that point where she is about to, like, go into the sky and be sacrificed, it's a really humbling moment because she's like, I don't want to go. But also she's like, I understand what needs to be done to make others happy. Yes. Oh, that's a lot.
It's a lot. And that's the difference between them because, like, Hina is, like, she's seen how she, has able to change other people's lives. And she's going to make that sacrifice and she's going to accept it. And Hodoka is just the, like, absolutely not. Like, you can't do that. Like, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. Like, I choose you over the sunshine, over possibly other people's happiness, Like, that's a discussion to have too. Like, is he, like, he's definitely, in a way, being selfish, but also, like, selfless and saving her, like, like,
what is the value of a life,
Yes, right? Exactly. And it's so crazy at the end there. So yeah, Hina is definitely, she's had a hard life too. And she, is just alone with her brother and she wants to be able to be with her brother and support him. And their relationship, their bond as siblings is so precious. Yes, let's talk about Nagi.
Oh, Nagi, my main man. Oh my gosh, I love him. He is like, okay, so it's her little brother. I don't even remember what his age is exactly, but
like 10, 8, I don't know, somewhere in there.
Okay, he is such a player. Like, he's just like, so, Hodoka first meets him because he's, like, at the back of a bus, and, like, he'll be sitting with one girl, chatting it up, and then she gets off at her stop, and then another girl comes on and, like, sits next to him. He's like, hey, and, like, and he's just like, oh my gosh, he's such a player. Like, so he's always got a girl on his side, and he's a very swanky kid. But he's just like, this is just hilarious to me. Okay, there's a part where he is taken away by child services when the stakes are high at the end. And this is how he escapes, ladies and gentlemen. His lady friends come to visit him. And his ex has, like, worn a wig. And yes, he has an ex even though he's little. And, like, his ex has worn a wig and extra clothes. So, like, while the child services person is away, they change clothes and he escapes. Like, yeah. I'm just like, you have so many connections and you're like, how old? Like,
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, he's just a precious little sunshine. Like, he is so, like, like, bad boy in that aspect of, like, oh honey, what are you doing? But also, like, the way he cares for his sister is just, oh my gosh, it says it all. And the way, like, he sees how Hodoka is falling for his sister.
Yes.
He's just like, let me give you some lessons because I care about you too.
Oh my goodness, it's so funny that Hodoka is asking Nagi for girl advice.
Yes, it's so funny when they have that moment. And like Nagi is like, dude, don't you know? Like this is the basic like law of, you know, being the guy in the situation and like what you should do and what you should say. And he's like, huh? How do you know all this? Like,
yes, it's so
I love
funny.
it.
It's so great. Their dynamic is fantastic. And, you know, Hina's sacrificing and doing all these things for her brother, but Nagi fights for his sister too.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, literally gets into the fray of things at the end. Like, and yeah, wants her happiness and like, you know, is helping Hodoka because like he sees what's happening between them and like, just supports his sister in so many ways. And he is like the true comedic, you know, aspect of the show.
Yes.
Other than, you know, Hodoka's just awkward nature, which is
I
fantastic.
think honestly my favorite characters of all these films are always the little sibling. Because like they just say it how it is.
Yes.
Like even like in Your Name, Mitsuha's little sister, love her. Love her.
So
She
good.
is just so brutal. And I like yeah, well she's at least being like honest with the situation. So also visually, I think that Nagi looks a lot like a young Howl. Like
You're
visually,
right. Their
like
hair.
the hair, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they act that same like suave way, you know?
Right, exactly. That's like what I thought. Especially when you see a clip at the end of Nagi a little more grown up, like a little taller. I was like, oh, it kind of looks like Howl.
And breaking more hearts out there as he grows up.
Right, exactly.
Oh man. So we also mentioned Suga. He's the writer, and he also, when he was young, ran away from home and was kind of in the same situation Hodoka was in. At the very beginning of the movie, when Hodoka is taking the ferry to Tokyo, he actually almost like falls off the boat, and Suga saves him. And that's how they kind of meet for the first time, and Suga kind of gives him his information just in case if he needs help, you know. And Suga hires Hodoka as, you know, an assistant, which basically, in return for food and shelter, basically. And for Hodoka, that means doing, like, all the chores and also, like, you know, writing some things and taking phone calls and all these other things that Suga doesn't want to do. So it's like Suga has a good heart and, like, you know, he sees himself in Hodoka and wants to do the best for him and like help him out, but he also is, you know, he's a little bit you know, he's struggling too, you know. His wife passed away, and he has a daughter that's in custody of his mother-in-law, so she is very protective of the daughter, and he wants to visit her and be with her, but you know, is there's that tension there of like trying to make his life better so that he can be with his daughter.
Right. Also, the daughter has severe asthma, so like the only time they can really hang out together is when it's like sunny out.
Right.
Not raining, but it's raining all the time.
But it's raining all the time. And so Suga, I love Suga, and it's a good adult viewpoint in the movie, I think, because he is the most, I think, cynical in the way of that he knows what needs to be done in the fact of like, this is reality. Like, you know, he's the slap in the face reality wise, especially near the end when child services is after them, and he is like, they're thinking of me as a suspect in kidnapping, and I need you to get out of here. Like, he wants to help, but he's like, oh, I have to do what I have to do, and kind of kicks him out. At the end, of course, he does redeem himself and like helps Hodoka and Hina regardless of the consequences to himself. But you know, just like everyone, he's struggling. He's trying to build up his life again.
Yeah, and it's understandable where his like conflict is coming from, because like him like choosing to help Hodoka, that is risking a reputation of his, which can thereby like affect the custody of his daughter, and like that's huge to like, you know, put the idea of getting custody over your daughter over and like choosing to help this kid instead in the moment because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really hard choice. And so I really like understand why he did what he did, but I am glad that he like redeemed himself in the end, like you said. I really love Suga as a character in this story. I think you really need him to help Hodoka along, and we also get to see like that him as an adult, he is not perfect as well.
Yeah.
And he's having his own battles. But when we're not focusing on his struggle, he's like such a supportive like dad figure and like helping out, which is just, isn't that adulthood right there? Like, you know, having to play your different roles at different times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another one of those really sweet, you know, father-son type relationships that I adore so much, and it's so touching. It's so nice to see that Suga, like, regardless of where he's at, he's still gonna try to help out this kid, you know, this lost kid.
One of my favorite moments is when he actually does get to spend a day with his daughter, and you get to see him as a dad playing with his little girl. It's so precious. I'm like, oh, Suga, you're so great.
So precious. Aw.
We should talk about Natsumi for a little bit.
Absolutely. Natsumi is Suga's niece who lives with him as well, and it writes for the business, I guess. But she is trying to get out of that. She's trying to get a real job.
Yeah. She, like most of us, goes to interview after interview, looking for a job, and it's not very successful. But I love her because she's just so invested but chill at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I think about how her and Hodoka, they, you know, drive around to talk with all these people about conspiracy theories, basically. And, you know, Hodoka is just like, how can this be true? Like, that is, like, not believable at all. Like, he's, like, kind of defaulting to science and, like, facts and, like, okay, how can this be real?
Right.
And but she's like leaning on her chin and like really invested in their story and like, oh, tell me more about what you saw. Like so invested in like believing their story. Or like when they go to see the fortune teller, she's like, oh yeah, that's definitely me. Oh yeah. Like that's something like like she's just so into it and believes. I just think that's so funny.
Yeah.
But also great.
It's so great. Like, yeah, she's very like, it's an interesting dynamic because in those moments she's like, oh, totally enraptured in that story and in the theories and in this you know, fables and all of that. And then I think because like when I think about it, like she wants that escapism because her real life is not at all what she's planning. Like she's really trying to get a good job and she's like, you know, trying to, you know, get on her own 2 feet and like it's just not happening for her, and she tries so hard. Yeah, like that's the thing. This movie, every single character is working their little butts off to like make things better, and it's just like the rain just keeps pouring. You know?
Oh, what a metaphor!
What a metaphor!
Whoa, Kelly, just hit me over the head right there. Oh my gosh, it's so true though. Like, how often, like, you know, do we like try so hard, and even when you're trying at your best, like sometimes the rain still pours. Yeah. And that's okay.
It's okay. And also, and again, wow, I'm just like having thoughts and like we're connecting things, but usually you can't control the weather.
Nope. That is a fact.
You can't control how some things go in life. You can't control this downpour. And then maybe is that saying that like with Hina and her ability to change, like, is that somehow a metaphor too? Don't know.
Right.
That it tears her down, it tears her apart to do that, you know?
Yeah. Breaks her down when she like, not that we shouldn't take matters into our own hands, but like when you try to control so much of something, right, like you begin to fall apart more.
Like you need to accept that there are some things that are the way they are.
Yeah. And the fact that is we can only control so many things, like, but honestly, we cannot control like 95% of life, you know? Right. Or even, not even that. Like,
the world we live in now. There's a pandemic. No one wanted this. No one chose this, but this is our rain. This is our storm, and it's happening. And so you can't control that, but you can control how you interact with it.
Right. Exactly. And that goes for not only the pandemic, but like, you know, all the political and social issues that we're encountering that are really intense. Like the reality, we were talking about this, like our world has always been crazy. Our world has always been chaos. But we're experiencing it for the first time, you know? And that's why it feels so fresh and so real. And like, there's only so many things we can control. Like, even in democracy, there's only so much we can vote on. And then, like, you know, whatever happens, it is the way it is. But it's how we react to our situations and how we learn to live. Whether it's, you know, the person we want leading us, or whether it's the way our system runs, or whether it's the way that our we control health situations, like everything. Like, you know, the reality is we don't have a lot of control over life.
The only thing you can control is yourself and how you interact with people and how you, you know, live your life. And that leads to, on the alternate scale, like, Hodoka takes action. Hodoka is like, Hina disappears. Hina disappears, and then the rain stops. And Hodoka does not accept that. And he defies all logic and, you know, runs away from the police and runs in a very Makoto Shinkai way. running. That's the thing for Makoto Shinkai. It's like, you gotta have the lovers chasing after each other.
Right.
The running. But Hodoka, you know, is like, will not accept Hina being gone and takes action and finds her and brings her back to the world. So as I think about it, it's kind of like this dual, you know, view of this downpour, this rain. Like, and he even says at the end, Hodoka does, like, you know, maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't us. And then he sees Hina again for the first time in 3 years and is like, no, we did change something. We changed the world. We did something. We caused the rain. And so it's like there's some of both, and it sparks that conversation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That choice is a huge one at the end, because like you want to think like, oh, he's kind of being selfish for just, you know, choosing her because he loves her. So obviously he wants her around.
Yeah.
But like, this isn't just a season of rain for Tokyo. It's not like this is going to end in 2 months. Like, it is raining, pouring, and will not stop. Like, it is going on. So like, who knows how long it will last. But the reality is that, according to like the anchor people that we have heard like in the background, like it's been going on for a long time. So like, everybody is desperate for the sun. I mean, there are kids who probably have never seen sunshine before. Like, that's the reality. And like, to have nice weather would be a huge change. Like, I mean, it's great for your emotions, you know, like getting that vitamin D in. It's great to just be outside and experience things that you can without the rain. But yet he still chooses her because her life is important too. And they decide to live in a Tokyo where it's constantly raining. And that's just so big to think about. I mean, there was a point where Hodoka was talking with an older lady, and she mentioned how Tokyo used to be a bay, like before it wasn't like a city at all. And then over time, like the area dried up and they were able to, you know, build the city. So now it's kind of like the world is going back to how it used to be with like all this rain. And she's looking at it from a very natural way. Well, this is just how the world works, because this is just, it's like the circle of life, right? You know, it's just like how it cycles, and looking at that as it's okay. Like, our world is ever changing, and, you know, we just adapt along with it. Like, I know it's not what we're used to and it's not what we're comfortable with, but like, there is a way to still live, even if we do miss out on other things, like what the sunshine brings. So
exactly. There's always like a sacrifice, you know, in that. That ending is such a big part of this film. I have never seen a film talk about a world disaster or a almost apocalyptic type natural phenomenon in such a positive light. Quite often, it's like this horrible thing, and you see the aftermath is nothing but destruction. And here, it's 3 years later at the end. Tokyo, it's constantly raining. Tokyo is underwater, and like life still goes on. You know, like the world still turns, people still live. They just live differently. And there's definitely, you can tell some nostalgia around how it would used to be, or like, yeah, like you said, there are people, you know, there's some things that's bad about that, about living in that type of world because of the things they're missing. But like for Hodaka, at least he's not missing her. You know?
That's his sunshine.
That's
right
his
there.
sunshine. Oh.
So cute.
And with that, like, disaster of Tokyo is underwater, just like you said, like, we get these little snippets of this is how it used to be, and little snippets of, like, there's another line where an old man is discussing this, like, mural about the weather and all weather maidens, and he's saying, you know how old this is? It's like 800 years old. When did all this rain? It's record breaking. When did your record start? Because the world is so much older than we are, and humanity in general is so much older than, like, our small part in it right now. You know, you know, how old are our records? Like, you know, think about that. And putting it back into our current, like, place in history. Yes, this pandemic is bad. And yes, we need to do things to change it. And yes, we can control our choices and how it affects other people. Absolutely. Wear your mask. But, but also, like, thinking on it in a global, you know, geological history, how long has the Anthropocene, you know, been around? And how much of that time do we not have record of? Almost all of it. Almost all of it we have no record of. So the world still turns, and that's what's so fascinating about this film, is the ending and the hopefulness of it, really, in the face of a disaster. Right.
Because you end the film seeing a city that's cloudy and dark and flooded always. Like, it's like, that is what you see. You don't see, like, a resolve of, oh, this pretty city and these pretty lovers. Like, no, it's, you see a city underwater, but you see the reunion of these two people because they've been separated for 3 years. Can't imagine what that would be like. But they finally get to see each other in an embrace, and it's a beautiful moment. But you see that visual of, like, you know, the world is still crazy. Like, we have to, like, take a boat everywhere instead of a car. But that's just how life is, and life will continue on. And it's such a hopeful ending, despite it's just so crazy with that visual, but it's still hopeful.
Right.
That's what's mind-blowing about this film, is, like, you leave it feeling so, like, to the brim, full of joy in your heart, because you're like, you know what? Yeah, like, my circumstances in the world, like, it feels like it sucks right now, but also, like, it's gonna be okay. Like, I just gotta take one day at a time.
Yeah, and we have each other, you know?
Yes, like, that is so huge. Like, who you surround yourself with. Surrounding yourself with people who love you and care for you and support you.
Exactly. Because with Hodaka, he doesn't care how crazy the world gets as long as he's with Hina, and that's really what matters.
That's really what matters.
Oh, man. This whole movie. Oh.
Yep.
But with his decision, let's also just comment on, like, it is hard. It is hard to think one sacrifice would make everything better. And is that worth it? Like, the characters even in the movie ask that question. Like, Suga at one point is like, one human sacrifice, that's all it would take. That's fine. You know?
For millions of people.
For millions of people, you know, having Sun, and it affects so much. Like, we don't even see the full effects of of the flooding, like what that means for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And is it the right call, you know? Like truly, because you think logically, it's like, well, maybe it's not the right call that Hodoka made. Maybe there has to be a sacrifice so that so many more millions of people can live well. But maybe he made the right choice. I don't know. Like,
right. Because like you said, the weather we can't control it and it's ever changing. So like maybe over time, like the water is gonna like recede again. Like, so I don't know. It's hard to decide whether he made the right decision or not, because like in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, as an outsider, it's easy to like see her as a sacrifice and not as a human being who has a life. So like, yeah, one person to save the whole world, great. But when you know that person and know who they are and know their memories, know their hobbies, whatever, like when you know their life, like you can't just give that up willingly.
It's just like when you think about stats on things, it's just like, she's not just a number. It's not just one person versus this many. It's a human being. It's Hina. And you know Hina. And you love Hina. And you don't want her to be gone. You watch Hodoka cry. That's one of the best scenes that we love.
Yes.
Is before she disappears. And she's telling him that, she's going to be a sacrifice. And he is just absolutely wrecked. And it's so hard to watch because you feel that too. You're just so connected to Hodoka and Hina, and you don't want to accept it either.
Yeah, he's so broken at the thought of losing her because she means so much to him.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a very moving scene. Because he like just gave her like a ring, and like her skin is like disappearing. Like it looks see-through like water.
Yeah.
And so like to see that visual of her fading away, like, oh, it's heart-wrenching.
So hard.
But like when I think of the decision as well, I think about the fact that, it's not like he's saying like, I'm like, it's her or the whole world is gonna like die.
Right.
It's just like her or the whole world is gonna have to make some changes for their lifestyle, which is still like a lot, but like, yeah.
I mean,
that's one thing to think about.
Businesses, livelihoods, crops, you know, there's probably a lot of other effects that it had on Tokyo, but it's, again, that's why we're talking about it, because there's so much to talk about. There's so much to think about. There's like, what is the right choice? Like, obviously this is a Makoto Shinkai romance drama, so they're going to end up together, but
they better.
But, there's a great quote by Makoto Shinkai, and he said, quote, "I thought, should I make my next film so that I don't anger more people, or should I make a movie that angers them further? And I chose the latter." Oh, Shinkai. And I love that. I love that he's just like, I'm going to have Tokyo be underwater. It's so great.
Yeah, I think in one of the behind the scenes, he's just like, well, I got to set my next movie in a different setting because Tokyo's underwater.
Right, yes. Like, if he made it in the same universe, because something we should definitely mention is that his other characters from Your Name, Taki and Misuha, make cameo appearances in this film. So you know that it's the same universe as Your Name. So if he does make another film in the same universe, he can't go into do anything in Tokyo because it's underwater.
Right. I love that you mentioned that because I was so excited to see, the whole audience gasped when they saw Taki, because Taki makes the first appearance, and like everybody was just like, like you could hear it. Like I was so excited,
and that's where I was like, oh my gosh, but I couldn't say anything because no one else was saying anything. And I was like,
You're like, oh, keep it together. Yeah. But like the whole audience and myself included were just so excited when we saw him, because one, it's just clever to like merge the universe and like, oh my gosh, they're here, like the Your Name characters are here. And I saw it subbed, so like I don't know whether the voice actors were the same, but for the English dub, which was a treat to watch as well, they used the original voice actors from Your Name. So Michael Sinter-Nicholas is Taki, and then Stephanie She is Mitsuha. And I think they also had her Mitsuha's little sister in there too.
Yes, they show her briefly.
Just very briefly. But it was just so fun to have the original voice actors, because it's harder for me to tell because I don't speak Japanese, so it's hard for me to like notice the voices and accents.
Yeah.
When I don't have like a face to the voice.
Mm-hmm.
But when I heard their voices through the English dub, I was like, oh my goodness, it's them. It's still the same. Like, that just like, it's so nostalgic for me. Like, it's a big part of why like I geek out when I watch Fruits Basket, like the new one, because they brought all the original voice actors back, and you're just like, it's my family.
Yes.
I love it.
It's such a nice touch to make sure it's the same voice actors for the English. Like, and it makes it even more impactful because you're like, oh my goodness, it's them. I get to see them. And Makoto Shinkai definitely wanted to bring them back in a way. And so the timeline is that when we see Taki and Mitsuha in the film, they have not yet reunited. That happens at the end of Your Name. So they're in the midst of that in the timeline.
I just love it when directors stay true to their characters, especially when bringing in cameos like that, because, I mean, how often have you seen a film growing up where a character was played by one person and then they changed it for the sequel because, like, the sequel isn't as popular or something, so they couldn't get that voice actor, or even in, like, live action films, not just animation, and it always is a little disappointing because it doesn't feel totally like that character. It doesn't feel completely the same. So it was just a treat. It made it all worth it.
Absolutely. It's so good. I just geek out about it every time. So we already talked about, we really love the moment where, Hina is saying she's going to be a sacrifice. Like, that moment's really impactful. We've talked about some other things that we really like. But what are some scenes or moments in the film that are your absolute favorite?
Ooh. Well, can it be like funny moments too?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so one of my favorite moments. Okay, so when Hodoka first lives with Suga and Natsumi, he doesn't know exactly who Natsumi is, and so he just assumes that she's a mistress.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny.
And so, like, he's going through his day with this thought in his mind, and then when they're, like, at the park one day, and, like, he finally discovers that she's really his niece, like, just Natsumi's reaction of, like, you thought I was his mistress, you sicko? Like, oh my gosh, that moment was one of my favorites because it's just so funny. I love it.
It's one of those great Hodoka moments where he's just so naive and like doesn't know what's going on, and then he gets really embarrassed about it. It's so cute.
This is a young little boy who doesn't know any better.
Yeah, he's so great.
So that's one of my favorite moments. I also really like when Hina makes lunch/dinner for Hodoka, and they, like, out of the food that he brought like some ramen packets, and like she like mixed up a whole bunch of stuff and made this grand meal for the two of them. And it was just such a sweet, like, innocent moment of these two people just sharing a meal together. So I really liked that too. But other than that, I think that my favorite moment, which we've already talked about, is when they're like embracing each other and crying as she's about to disappear. Like, that's the most impactful for sure.
Emotional. Speaking of food, I just really love the moment at the beginning when they first meet and Hina's working at McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
And Hodoka at this point has, like, gone through a lot of his money. He doesn't have a lot. And so he's super hungry. And she comes by and leaves a burger for him. And he opens it up. And I love the animation. It's just, like, it's the most beautiful hamburger you've ever seen. And, like, the bun, like, fluffs up again, And then he's like, this is the most fantastic meal I've ever had,
Right. And
it's just, like, that first time meeting, and like Hina, cares for other people too, and it just, Hodoka is trying so hard, but he's just not really cut out for, he's still a kid, and he can't quite he's on the run, which seems so odd for his type of character, you know, because he's very smart. He's very, like, he kept his budgeting, you know, he works really hard. He's such a hard worker when he's with Suga. And yet, you know.
And he's not like a troublemaker.
No,
like he isn't like doing anything bad. He just is underage.
Exactly. Which, and I'll get to some of my other favorite parts in a second, but it leads me to a good question of, they never really fully explain what happened to make him want to run away. They never say it outright, but I do have some ideas. What do you think?
I'm not really sure, actually, because we know that, like, he's from a rural town and, you know, not much is going on. Like, when I think of his rural town, I think of Mitsuha's town. Yeah. And maybe it was the same town. Whoa. Who knows? Probably not.
He lived on an island.
Oh, that's right. That's right. But, you know, part of me wants to think maybe he just had, like, a rebel moment like Mitsuha, where she's just like, oh, I just want to get out of the small town and live my life and, like, move to the city. But it just, the stakes seemed way too high for, like, his running away, because that's very intense, like, crossing the water to, like, get there. And so it has to be something more severe than just being a rebel. So, I mean, his parents are not in the picture at all, and they're not described very much at all.
No.
So I'm wondering if, like, maybe he had, like, some abusive parents, but I don't know, maybe it was something completely different.
Right. The only clues that we get really are the fact that, he is willing to go hungry and live on the street rather than go back. He actively, when multiple people tell him now's the time, you just need to go home, he is absolutely not having it. He is like, no, I will never go back. He's very, very determined about that when he's, faced with that. And the other little clue that I don't know for sure if that is the case, but I like to think so, or at least it hit me that this would be the case. At the beginning of his journey, he has bandages all over his face.
Yep.
And the first time that I saw it, I was thinking immediately, there's some sort of family trouble. I bet he's having some abusive family issues. And that's why he's running away. Which is definitely possible still.
Well, and especially since, like, there isn't personality given to the parents.
Right.
Like, they're just a face.
Exactly.
A face that we don't see. Like, we never see them.
No.
But, like, they're just mom, dad. That is all you get.
That's it. And then this time watching it through, though, I was, like, wondering, because there's a moment where he looks back on running away, and he was in his school uniform and he's riding his bike on the island and he's chasing the sunlight, and then he gets to the edge of the island and the sunlight goes and he can't follow it. And I'm wondering, well, what if it's more of like a school bully situation or something too? Because it doesn't necessarily say anything that he's in his school uniform, but it just made me think, oh, I wonder if it's like another like social problem, like with kids his own age, rather than family, because his family does put out a missing persons report for him and stuff, right. which doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't abusive. Like, abusive family members can still be outwardly concerned, quote unquote, you know, and still put on a face. Like, who knows what his situation was. But I do think it's worth mentioning, and I do think it's worth pointing out that Makoto Shinkai doesn't give us a direct answer. And I think it's genius, because I say this so often when we review films, but I'm a big advocate for shaving off extra content. You don't need to say everything. You don't, like, right. Like, he could have, and I feel like this would have been more of a Western, you know, director's opinion or studio's opinion, to have a whole, like, beginning scene at home or something that would show us exactly what he's running from. But we don't need it in this story. We don't. No. Because there are enough context clues to know whatever it is that he's running from, he is adamant about not going back.
Right.
And it saves so much time for all this other stuff going on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely something that I appreciate about his work is, you don't have to have all the details. Yeah, like sometimes like when you're watching a show like that has multiple episodes, it's really interesting to like get bits of information at a time and like reveal different backstories. But like for a film like this, you don't need all of the information. In fact, the information takes away the mystery of the story.
Yes.
And that's what makes a good plot line and a good story arc is just like having a bit of unknown. Because without that, then like it's just all there before you and that's it. There's nothing for you to wonder about.
Yes.
And wonder is the big part of storytelling.
I agree wholeheartedly. And Makoto Shinkai knows how to leave those little things for your imagination to grow. Exactly with, like I said too, about the consequences of Tokyo being underwater. We see some of it definitely, but again, he could have spent a whole bunch of time showing us all these ways in which it affected the world. But it's not, this story isn't about the world, it's about Hina and Hodoka. And that's the key, is Makoto Shinkai has focused in, narrowed, his vision into what this story is about and who it's about, and he focuses on them. And he's not doing all this other narrative stuff because there's enough context clues in the rest of the film for us to be focused on them, but still understand what's going on around the world.
Exactly. I love it.
Makoto Shinkai is so good.
Love it. So good. So good.
So good. But I also wanted to say some of my other favorite moments are mostly like animation-wise.
Oh, totally. Yes. Like, I mean, I didn't even go into that. I just went into like emotional moments.
Right? Oh, there are many and they're all great. And I really love, we got to talk about the fireworks scene.
Oh, the fireworks. Oh, like we said at the beginning, like this is animation candy. Like, I mean, like every
eye candy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, every scene you're like, wow, wow, wow. Like just the whole time. So one of our favorite scenes that Kelly just mentioned is there's like a festival going on, or is it like a business like group thing? There's like multiple things going on. But
yes.
Anyway, there's a big fireworks display and oh my gosh, like it is so beautiful because not only do you have just the animation of the firework, but it's a great use of 3D. So you're like, as the person, the camera is like panning around the firework on all sides. And like, you're just like seeing the sky and oh my goodness, it was so lifelike. I'm like, is this anime? I don't know. And like, or like even just like moments when you'd look at a character and then they would do a pan where it like does like a 360 around them. I'm like,
yes.
This is a 2D character, but like they're in 3D. Like what?
It's so good. Guys, listen to the Your Name episode, but I rant about Makoto Shinkai for a lot of that. But to give you a quick synopsis, like Makoto Shinkai's work, he is always pushing the boundaries of the 3D animation, 2D animation hybrid. Like he focuses on detail, like we said. His work is incredibly detailed, so focused on little tiny everything. Like it's all about the detail. What's in Hina's room? What's the food they're making? Like everything seems so real and lifelike and beautiful. And then on top of that, he's using 3D technology to its limits and its best abilities merged with 2D, especially for Japan. I truly believe, studios in the West, totally breaking boundaries 3D wise. Totally. But Makoto Shinkai, I really truly believe, is like the forerunner in Japan for, pushing boundaries of animation. Technically. And that fireworks scene is so breathtakingly beautiful. And like I said, Your Name is the same. It's beautiful and fantastic and you're just in awe. But there's something about this film where you are just, my jaw hits the ground every single shot. It's breathtaking.
And I think part of that is that there's more three-dimensional elements in it than Your Name. Like, Your Name is just gorgeous lighting-wise, like with the comet or the sunsets over the mountain. Like,
the
there's
detail
a lot
of the leaves and things like that.
There's a lot of like light, and then in this film in particular, it's just like the dimension of everything. So like another technical aspect is the fact that it's raining the whole time, and there will be like pans of, or just like shots of puddles, and you see raindrops falling into it.
Yes.
And like the three-dimensional like look of the drop, each individual drops, like it's crazy.
So much detail is put into this film. It is insane. So let's just go into animation everything right now, all right? Makoto Shinkai, as we're talking about rain, did use 3D CG elements to create some rain, and then a lot of it is hand-drawn 2D animation. Every single time there's a shot of, like you said, rainwater like hitting a puddle. All these little droplets are all done by hand. It is so good.
Yeah, especially since rain is like the hardest thing to draw, and it's raining the whole time.
Yes. If you've listened to this podcast at all, I talk about it all the time. Rain, making things wet, because there are so many more elements that you have to add. You're adding all of the water. You're adding all the things the water interacts with. Everything the water touches. You're making hair and skin wet. You're making the reflections in the water, in the puddles. You have to draw all of that. You have to draw how, if Makoto Shinkai said in an interview, like, if there are some see-through umbrellas in this, it's just like, Makoto Shinkai, why are you making this more difficult than it needs to be? Because he does.
It could have been a red umbrella, but nope, it's a transparent one.
Transparent. And so he's got to draw everything that's through the umbrella and on the umbrella. And it's just like, what is going on? The detail is so fantastic. And one more thing about the rain, one of my favorite scenes, Hodaka is running after, taking Hina away from these guys that are bad, and they catch up with him, and they're like beating him to a pulp, and he's in the rain, and it's just like so crazy to see all these raindrops falling on his face, and like it's just so well done, and I'm just in awe of all of it.
Yeah, and I think Makoto Shinkai in that interview said that was one of the hardest scenes to draw technically because of all the rain falling on his face and then falling off and dripping like it was pouring in that scene. So he said it was one of the toughest, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was crazy.
And thinking about Makoto Shinkai's other works, we just recently watched also Garden of Words. And although we are not a huge fan of that film, for multiple reasons, you can definitely tell that is a step in the direction of Weathering with You, because it is also centered around rain. It's about these people who always skip work or class when it's raining, and so they meet in the park. So it's a lot of the same like rain elements, and you can definitely, it's just so cool to see like Makoto Shinkai's style improving and the steps that he's taken moving into Weathering with You. Like, it's like Garden of Words, he was working with rain, working with that technical aspect and that feel, and then he's taking that and merging it with like the plot and structure of Your Name and like putting them together. And it's really fascinating. Makoto Shinkai also said in that interview that like he has used rain a lot, in the past, and used the weather to help tell the story and tell the emotion. But this was the first time in Weathering with You where he made the weather aggressive.
Yes.
The rain is almost a character in and of itself. Honestly, like the weather.
Yes, the weather is its own character.
Yes, and so it's aggressive. It's terrifying at points. Like it's, they're out on the street and it's, they're fighting against the elements. And it's just so beautiful. Like really, like again, I just want to look and stare and drool over this movie. It's so good.
I have a follow-up question then for that. So he mentioned that like, this is like the first time he's really made like the weather aggressive. Because like I could see how like in Garden of Words, like the rain was very light and like, yeah, it would rain hard, but it was more beautiful than anything. But, in Your Name, we do have the comet, which isn't necessarily quote unquote weather, but it is the elements of the universe, like, rock flying through space. And it's portrayed as something beautiful, but it's also super destructive as it destroys a town. So it's hard. Like, I kind of would consider that like aggressive weather too, even though it's not like typical weather. Comets are like out of this world. So
yeah, I don't know if I would determine that as a comet as weather, but it's definitely like,
it's definitely another element though.
It's definitely an element. it's proof that he's not afraid to be aggressive plot-wise, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But that is another example of how, like, you can't control the things that happen. Like, it is a beautiful thing, like, flying through the sky. It's gorgeous, but it's also destructive. But it's not like that comet was thinking to itself, I'm going to destroy a town today. Like,
right.
Comets just come and go. It's just a way of the universe. Like, you can't control it.
And that's another example of Makoto Shinkai going, you know, his characters are changing the way of the world in a way that, like, in Your Name, they're fighting to protect everybody. In that way, they don't control the comet, but they do control... They are trying to, you know, they control their actions to help everyone out of the area.
Evacuate,
you know, to evacuate. And so, yeah, it's like another thing of, like, fighting against nature, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. And as we're talking about Your Name, as we've mentioned quite a bit already, I think it's good to note, like, to compare them. Because quite honestly, you know, looking at all of Makoto Shinkai's works, these two are compared the most because Your Name is really what elevated him to such heights, and because they're in the same universe and they are very similar. So these two films of his are compared the most because they are the most recent and because they're connected in a lot of ways. And I don't think that's wrong of us to compare them because it really feels like another Your Name.
Right. And I mean, they were made so close in proximity together. And as you said, like, they're in the same universe, so it's hard not to compare them.
Exactly. And so some people really, I just want to acknowledge that some people are very unhappy with the plot structure of Weathering With You because it is almost the exact same plot structure as Your Name. And I would agree. I do also agree that, like we said at the beginning, Your Name is up there. I think it's a better plot in general, for sure.
Agreed.
And they have a little bit of different tones. Like, Your Name feels exceptionally more almost energetic, more fast-paced, definitely. Like, Weathering With You is slower paced, and Weathering With You is, like, it definitely has moments where it is action, but it is much more slow and melancholy, and maybe that's just the rain talking.
Yeah, true. I feel like the stakes are a little higher in Your Name, just with the, you know, because it's not just, like, the livelihood of people at stake, but, like, in Your Name, like, this town is going to be destroyed and thousands of people are going to die. So it's, like, that stake of, like, we have to get people out. Like, that really drives it.
I would agree, because then you also see in Your Name, like, you know, you see Mitsuha's name in the list of the victims.
Oh,
like,
yes. You're like, ooh.
you see this possible future that has hurt so many people. And that's the thing, though. With Weathering With You, he very easily could have made it more serious in that way, I think. Because maybe if he wanted to make it even more of a hard choice, maybe between Hina and the rain, you know, like, are you going to, but he chooses, you know, Makoto Shinkai has made choices, I think, to make it less dramatic in that way, you know, to make it definitely does have dramatic moments and tension and really well done dramatic tension, but it's still, it's, like I said, it's about Hina and Hodoka. Your Name has a lot more other people. Like, it does. It's about the town, too, you know?
I think that if the people's lives were at stake in Weathering With You, like, then I might not enjoy it as much, because then it would be too much like Your Name. Like, I mean, the point is that they're different stories.
Yeah.
Like, yes, they're very similar, but it's a different film, and that's the point. And because I like how, you know, in one case you're looking at nature as something that can wipe you out, and in this case it's like, okay, but nature we can adapt to it because it's ever changing. And I like that shift in perspective because, like I just said, it's a shift in perspective. Like, you like get another view of what it's like. So yeah, so though in Your Name the stakes are definitely heightened, I don't think that, like, it's more intriguing of a plot for sure, but it doesn't necessarily make it better or worse compared to Weathering with You. They're just both great for different reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Truly they are. And I would also note that creatives in all sorts of spheres plagiarize themselves. Like, that's honestly a creative's journey often includes that, because you're always, a creative will think about the same things, will explore the same themes, will, develop something deeper and deeper. And you can see it in Makoto Shinkai's other works. Like almost his whole filmography is looking at relationships over a long distance. So, there's a couple that are separated by space. The girl is an astronaut basically, and there's Garden of Words. We've got two characters who are distanced by age. We have Your Name. We have two characters distanced by time. They live in different years. They're and now we have Weathering with You, and they're distanced by this supernatural phenomenon. He has always been focused on that theme, on those types of relationships and how you're running after another person and what you're gonna do to sacrifice being with them. What are you up against trying to be together? And so I would just say this is just another step into his themes, where his heart is, where his stories almost always, I should say. Not all of them are like that, but that's very clearly an overall theme in his works. And some people I've heard argue too that like, oh, well, Your Name was the pinnacle and he should have done something different. Granted, I do agree that Your Name reaches heights.
It is great.
It is amazing. But, even though Weathering with You in the plot structure might not have been a step up, it's still a step forward. And you have no idea. Thank you. And you have no idea where it's going to go from here. If he continues with these themes, he might surpass Your Name. Like he still has a lot of time left. I mean, he has only been animating since he was 30. So like he's done so much and he's explored so much and he's got a lot more to say. And that makes me really excited. Which makes me go into the question of, what do you want to see from Makoto Shinkai in the future?
Well, kind of like, going based off of what we just discussed. I like how, so in Your Name, we have, now I know it's a very complex plot, but we have more of a concrete arc, as in like, these are two characters that are trying to be together, and then they like find a way to change the fate of time, and like change things, and then they're together at the end. And it's like, I feel like with that fantastical element, like we don't know the universe as well, so we can't like make the proper choices for these characters, but like they know what needs to be done and it's done. And then in Weathering with You, it's a lot more open-ended, where instead of a concrete ending of like we're finally together and we got through that hard time, like instead it leaves the audience a little bit more questioning and thinking about a situation, like, because I love Your Name, but like I just feel like super happy at the end. And Weathering with You, I feel super happy as well, but I'm also very contemplative. I'm thinking about like, ooh, like how this relates to real life, like wow, this gives a really interesting perspective. So like from that shift of those two films, like what I would love to see like story-wise is to continue to see how he like asks the audience more questions about the world they live in or the relationships they interact with, like more questions like that shift our focus a little bit. I would love to see more of that.
That's beautiful. I have a feeling that Makoto Shinkai will continue with this narrative. However, and I feel like fine in saying that and seeing that. However, I would love for this one to not follow the Your Name Weathering with You structure. I would like it to do something different. quite possibly even a tragic ending.
Ooh, yes.
You know how I love a sad ending.
No, but we need those too, you know? Like, we need those.
And if anything, at least Makoto Shinkai actually does have consequences for things. So, like, there's always, like, consequences. But they always end up together, usually. So, what if they didn't? I don't know. Like, what... I know his point is always that the distance will never stop them. But what would happen if it did? What distance is there that would keep people apart? Like, truly.
Death.
Oh!
Yikes.
I don't know. I don't know if Shinkai will go there because he's
gonna pull a Romeo and Juliet. Like, yikes.
Well, see, they're in death together.
If they're both dead, yes. But what if only one of them is dead?
That's what Romeo and Juliet is. They both die.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
If one dies, like non-Romeo and Juliet-esque, if only one person is killed and the other person decides to live on, you know, they are separated by a distance.
That is a distance. I think that, honestly, would make a beautiful film. Because you can have lots of, like, backflashes to, like, their time together. But also you see this person having to live on without them. But also, you know, still possibly very well happening that you discover more things about a person after they're gone.
Yes,
know?
indeed.
A relationship still continues even after death.
Whoa.
We're writing the next Makoto Shinkai film right now.
Yes.
And that's another thing too, just mentioning, like, I love his films so much because he writes them.
Yes. They're so good.
They're so good, and it's all such original work. Like, you see so often animated films in all areas of the world are often based off of books, children's books, or comics or manga that are already created. You know, they're already working off of a base. And Makoto Shinkai just creates whatever.
Yeah,
like he writes a script.
Whatever.
And that leads to
the music.
The music, yes, I was going to say.
Because Radwimps, they're the group who did the music for Your Name as well. They did all of the music for the soundtrack, and I just love them. Their music is so beautiful. I listen to it always. It makes me cry and makes me happy. Like, it's so perfect. And I'm playing it on the piano, so that's fun. But anyway, like, in this interview with Makoto Shinkai, like, he talked about how, like, he didn't, like, have the full story, like, created. He created the story by, like, listening to pieces that Radwimps would create musically, or Radwimps would create things based off of the script they had so far. And, like, they would, like, collaborate to create the story through the music. Like, the music helped create the story. Like, what? Ooh, so cool. They
definitely affected each other within the process and were created, like, the script and the music were happening at the same time, which is really fantastic to hear about. Like, Makoto Shinkai wrote a script, had the story, gave it to them, and they, like, came back with this music, and that influenced the story more. And Makoto Shinkai said that, like, he will look at a scene and be like, oh, this needs another lyrical piece, like, music with lyrics, like, here, make something for that. And, Radwimps music, they know how to pull on your heartstrings.
They do.
So good.
Yes, it's so pure and perfect. I also love how, the soundtrack of a film really impacts, like, the emotions you're feeling during a scene. Like, when you hear a rush of music and they're, like, embracing or something, like, you know, you're suddenly crying because you're like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
Yes.
Like, the soundtrack is so impactful, but usually that's, like, a last editing piece, like, something that's put over as, like, conductors are watching the screen, they're watching the film, and they're moving their band or their orchestra according to the film. But what is so fascinating about this particular project is that they worked it, like, together. Like, it wasn't the aftermath, like, put on top as a layer, but it was part of the process.
You're making storyboards to match the music rather than music to match the storyboards.
Exactly.
Phenomenal.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing.
Oh, love it. So good.
And just like we said, we watched Garden of Words recently, and I think that's a good example of the music not connecting emotionally. Because when I was watching it, I was like, this feels so much like a Makoto Shinkai film, but something's off. Mm-hmm. And the thing that was off for me, besides we don't really love the plot, is that the music wasn't as emotionally connecting. Like, truly, Radwimp's music is so phenomenal, and like I cannot explain it, but truly, it's the music can make or break a movie, like any movie, and the music is what tells the audience what to feel, and the visuals, like the film tells the audience what to know about. You know what I mean? That's how I feel like it is.
Totally. I mean, like, if you're a Lord of the Rings geek, like on all those like behind the scenes CDs or discs or whatever, you know, I feel so old school. There's always like this music section where they'll play one theme of the Lord of the Rings to a scene, and then they'll play that scene again with a different theme, and it totally changes the emotion you're feeling. So like music is like an essential part of this process. And for Weathering with You, it produces all the feels. So
many feelings. This movie is so good. I need everyone to go watch it right now.
It's beautiful, and it gets you thinking, and it makes you hopeful.
It does. It makes you hopeful. I mean, where else can you find like a world disaster movie that's positive? Right. And of course, like,
I'm sorry, Avengers is not going to do it for you. Like,
no. As much as we love Avengers. It's so great how, like, Makoto Shinkai made this, obviously, with reflections on climate change, and for him personally experiencing extra rain in Japan. And yet, now, watching it in 2020, I am like, this is also comparable to our current world situation.
Yeah, with the pandemic. For sure.
And I just think it's a really beautiful story, and it's a really beautiful, way to look at the world, and knowing that, first off, yes, there are things you can change, and you can change the world. And also, our place in the world is small. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. No. It's just the way things are. And it's such a beautiful perspective that we will never get in Western animation.
So true. I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I would really encourage you, especially in this year 2020 that's been crazy, to give this film a go, because it just reminds us that, we will get through today. Like, we will. Our world is insane. Yes, there's a lot going on, but life is so much more than those things. And like, hold on to what truly matters, because we are going to be okay. And, if you need to, like me, just take it one day at a time, and that's okay, because we only have today.
Perfectly said. If you need a little hope, go watch Weathering with You. It'll make you feel full.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Emma, so much for geeking out about Weathering with You with me.
Of course. Anytime. I love geeking out.
Yes. Oh, man. We have more Makoto Shinkai films to watch and talk about.
Yes, we do.
Maybe not Garden of Words, but...
Yeah, no.
We'll pass on that
It's
one.
a hard pass.
And we're excited to see what Makoto Shinkai comes up with next.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next film.
Absolutely. In the meantime, I hope everyone goes and listens to our Your Name discussion and watches this film. Definitely let us know what you think. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Fanimated Podcast. You can email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Leave a rating review. You can let us know what you think of the film there too. We love that. And we'll talk to you soon, Emma.
All right, talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. This was one of my absolute favorite recordings of the year, and I'd really, really love to hear your thoughts on this film and what you think Makoto Shinkai should work on next. You can email me at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at Fanimated Podcast. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music. The art is done by myself. You can follow me on Instagram at CandorDraw. Thank you to our fantastic Fanimated crew at patreon.com/Fanimated for voting on this topic and supporting the podcast. Thank you, Emma, for joining me to discuss Weathering with you, and keep an eye out for next week's episode when the two of us look back on our other favorite 2020 releases to wrap up the year. In the meantime, happy holidays, and stay tuned and stay animated. Did this movie make you cry the first time you watched it?
That's a great question.
Did you cry at Your Name?
In the theater, no. The next few times I watched it, yes.
And every time we listened to the music?
Yes. Weathering with You, I don't think I cried the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because, well, it depends on the film. But, like, with a film like this, where you don't, like, really cry until you get it, like...
Yeah.
Because, like, the first time watching, like, Your Name or the first time watching Weathering with You...
You're just following along.
Right, you're following along. There's so much to take in that, like, it's just not happening. Mm-hmm. But then, like, when you have time to sit and, like, really connect the dots and, like, you've watched it multiple times, so, like, it makes even more sense. That's when the emotions come and you're like, oh my gosh.
Like, cry.
Oh, yeah.
Cry all the tears that are raining down.
Mm-hmm.